Talk to your specialist about Botox Cosmetic, Anabotulinum Toxin A, because Botox Cosmetic Day is back on November 20th. For one day only, buy one $50 gift card, get one free, while supplies last. It gets better because it's not just one day of celebration, but the whole month of November. Refer a friend to Ali, and you'll both get $50 off a Botox Cosmetic treatment. Plus, if you register and get treated during November 1st to 30th, you have the chance to win $10,000. For prescribing information and box warning, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300. No purchase necessary for sweepstakes entry. Treatment must occur by 12/6. For full official rules, offer terms and conditions, and to join Ali, visit BotoxCosmeticDay.com.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello, I hope you had a good weekend by FPL. Unfortunately, I had a bit of a clanger as my old MacBook finally gave up the ghost, Sam, after one too many baths of a mixture of beer, squash, and water. Let's say I'm hugely thankful to Apple Time Machine and my ability to sell some unwanted cryptocurrencies to cover the cost. But what an absolute pain that was. However, here I am with a brand new MacBook Pro, ready and waiting, and it plays Football Manager like a dream, which is always a plus. Also, yeah, Blue Sky has taken off, hasn't it? For those who care, just to say, I have now pretty much migrated over, and WGTA on there, of course, and Sam is FPL pricey, I believe, as it was on over on X. Anyway, I randomly launched into a tangent, so let's bring it back and bring it to Sam. How are you, mate? Good weekend away from FPL? The pain, the suffering, etc. Last one for a while, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have another international break all the way through until March now. So we really are now in the crunch time for FPL. And it's the time that we always say we most enjoy, but it does come thick and fast. It is stressful at times, and you've got to act fast to all of this news and all of the game weeks coming pretty much every 3 days at certain points over the next couple of months. But yeah, exciting times. This is why we play the game, and really excited to crack on with it and hopefully improve our ranks in the next 10 or so game weeks. In the meantime, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, we'll be talking team updates, just to remind you all where we left off before the international break, all that 1 week and 1 day ago. A look back at the 10 mistakes we said on a preseason pod that we wouldn't be making, and figure out if we've made any of them. Spoiler, we definitely have. And what we've learned that might help us going into the upcoming hectic period. Plus, of course, the preview returns. We'll combine the knee-jerk with our teams for next week. No transfers made as of yet, as both of us are considering big hits in certain cases. And we'll be definitely talking about that and debating that and the merits and drawbacks to both of those alleged big hits. Then, of course, best transfers, best captains, bold claims, and all of that juicy stuff ahead of game week 12. It's Monday, the 18th of November. The international break is coming to an end, thankfully. And let's crack on with the game week previews, I think.
Well, I mean, before that, is there any anything from the international break we need to update on? I mean, Palmer, Trent, Saka, nothing yet, I don't think, in terms of them.
Palmer trained today.
Palmer trained. Oh, that's good then. Okay.
Yeah.
That's I think that one was kind of discernibly a bit of a rest and recuperation. Hopefully the same with Saka, but we're not going to find out anything from Arteta, are we? Let's face it. And then Trent, well, that looks a bit more testy. So I think he may be leaving my team as part of the big hit that you mentioned. And someone in the chat just said Saka will play. I have no worries about that one at all. And Boomo with a random flag. I think I only clocked that because I heard Always Cheating mention it. I was like, oh, I hadn't looked at FPL for a week, and I was like, wow, okay, but didn't he play with 90 minutes versus Bournemouth? So yeah, I mean, I assume that one's all right.
He came off, didn't he? Last 10 minutes or so. It was not Saka, or are you talking about someone else?
Boomo.
Oh, Bumo. Sorry. No, I think he's fine. I'm pretty sure that was an international break injury, and I think his international team coach basically said it is an international break injury kind of thing. It's quite a light one, so I'm sure Brentford will probably post a photo of him at some point in the next few days to calm us all down. Should be okay, but obviously one to look out for at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. I assume that will be all right. I mean, maybe on his way in the next few weeks, but probably not for now. People in the chat saying Buissa has been flagged as well.
I think it's the same.
Same as similar to Semenyo, isn't it? As we kind of talked about last week, that I feel like these are all just international break injuries, and with the onslaught of fixtures due to come soon, I suspect that a lot of players are taking the opportunity to say, "Oh, I felt something." Yeah, definitely, and the club is probably just collaborating with that and be like, "Yeah, he definitely felt something. Yeah, definitely got a sore back." I think was the usual excuse, which is very hard to sort of pick up and diagnose. So, hey, there we go. Yeah, so game week reviews, we went through them last week. I guess probably to look at them again, just trying to remind ourselves what the hell happened last time round. Yeah, I mean, we both had fairly poor weeks, didn't we? As far as I remember. And it was the case that if you put both of our weeks together, we'd have had a stellar week. But you hit the captain and I hit all the differentials. But both of us managed to get kind of around the 50s and a bit of a red arrow.
Yeah, I mean, at the rank I'm at, 54 was almost a grey arrow. So I wouldn't go out of my way and say it was a really poor week. It was just a little uninspiring, I suppose, going into the international break. And I think more than anything else, those of you who are watching on the stream who've got the visuals in front of you, it's the actual individual players in my 11 at the moment that really are the worrying part. It's the fact that I've still got a Calvert-Lewin, I've got Rico Lewis. I'll probably have to start Pedro Porro against City this upcoming week. Double Arsenal defence has obviously been very frustrating, although I think probably turn a corner fairly soon. And I do have triple Spurs ahead of that City game too. So there are plenty of issues there. And even though the game week itself was a little dry, there wasn't really much to shout about other than the captaincy. It was more just the fact that I know on the horizon there are going to be a lot of issues that I need to solve, and I've only got 2 free transfers to do it with at the moment. So, yeah, that's a little bit frustrating. I feel like I'm a little, like 2 or 3 transfers behind where I really want to be at the moment, and obviously we'll come on to that later on in the pods. But yeah, nailed the captaincy, so at least that's something.
Yeah, indeed. So I went the other way and didn't nail the captaincy. I brought in Solanke and for last week. I brought in Cunha as well. Cunha obviously came in with the 12 points. I got the 3 differential kind of returns you tend to sort of need to get a green arrow. So I had the Cunha goal and assist. I had the Garnacho goal off the bench, and I played Fabianski for reasons I still can't really quite remember. I looked over my text with you last Saturday morning, and I was so hungover that I couldn't make top or tail of it, and you clearly couldn't either. But yeah, I played Fabianski, and that 1 point that he got in the bonus point lotteries, as I said last week, got me just inside the top million with the red arrow, which is not great. Red arrow was mainly because I captained Solanke over Salah. If I captained Salah, absolutely happy days. I'm sure it would have been quite a stonking green. As it was, just kind of thought that Solanke versus Ipswich, I think reflects on your bold claim last week, it would have been kind of, he'd have had a hatful of chances, and it wouldn't have taken much to get the green arrow out of him. I think if that goal, which was ruled out, had been given, I'm sure I would have probably snuck a tiny green. So yeah, frustrating all round. Yeah, frustrating all round.
Yeah.
But hey, them's the breaks, and much like you, I've got issues kind of around the place. I've got Trent, I've got 2 Spurs versus City, which is probably not a massive issue on paper. There's a few players that I want. Looking at Saka coming in, I mentioned Matoma a lot last week, and I'm still kind of quite set on bringing him in as well. Garnacho, obviously, I've spoken to a few, and we'll speak about this later on, of course. I'll just kind of touch on it now. I spoke to a few Man United minded individuals over on Blue Sky, and it does seem that Garnacho's place in the team is definitely kind of under question, shall we say, under the new manager. But let's talk about something else first, which is the main topic this week, which is we kind of thought it might be a good idea to go through the 10 mistakes we said we wouldn't make in preseason and see if we've done them. Spoiler, yes. And try to kind of figure out, take stock of where what we've been doing wrong, I guess, based on these, and see what we can do going forward. So Sam mentioned lots and lots going on, a real onslaught of FPL activity coming up. As of next Saturday, we'll have 9 game weeks in 42 days, one every 4.7 days, and it's the first midweek deadline of the season coming up. So if you're in the UK, you'll be watching that on Amazon Prime, I believe. With so much going on, we felt it might just be good to have a little look at our principles pre-season a bit, given our respective ranks not being, it's fair to say, exactly where we want to be. So where have we lost our way, and what can we take from this going forward? Hopefully this is useful for you as well. If you're in the doldrums, not where you want to be. I assume most people aren't where they want to be. Even if you're kind of, in the top 10K, you always want more. That's not true. So if you are in the minority, happy with your performance so far, hopefully this is a bit of schadenfreude, or something that hopefully nonetheless entertaining. We'll do a big preview of the 3 game weeks in 7 days thing next week. It's a little bit closer. We'll have more info around that. So, for example, we could talk up a player now, they get injured in the international break, or injured next weekend, and it suddenly kind of all gets quite dated. So we thought this might be a good juncture to have a rare kind of double step back and chat through this. So I suppose, just a bit of an open discussion really here, Sam. Just go through each and say, have we made this mistake? And how will you learn and see what happens really with this one? They are in order of you and me and the 5 that we all put in together. So if you're watching on YouTube, watching back on YouTube, the ones in purple are mine, the one in white are Sam. The first one, though, I think we've both been quite guilty of, and I think it's probably worth just meditating on this one tiny bit longer than some of the others, perhaps. I will try not to be too clever, a mistake we both said that we were not going to be making. And lo and behold, here we are, double-digit game weeks in, and we both have been falling prey to this, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, I was falling prey to this before game week 1 even started in the end. So I wish this was my feedback that I needed to listen to more closely at the start of the season. But yeah, straight away I went with risks in my first 11. So Minte as well, even though it looked promising, it's still a risk. And at the start of the season, I need to remind myself of it every year, that even if it seems like a certain thing, unless we've physically seen it in the Premier League before, I need to disregard it. And those sort of risks just never work out for me. So people like Minte immediately caused me an issue. Armstrong as well made it into my first team. That was very quickly an issue as well. And I was just taking too many bets on too many, what I consider to be high upside picks with good data in other leagues, thinking, okay, this is something no one else is really considering. What about this guy? What about that guy? And it was just trying to be way too clever. During the season itself as well, I have fell victim to it at least once. That definitely comes to mind is the Foden, Son and Porro triple swap a few game weeks back. And that really did bite me very quickly. And that was just, I saw an opportunity where there wasn't one, and really tried to get way too far ahead of the crowd when there wasn't really that shortcut to be taken. And that was definitely another instance of me being far too clever for my own good. And in the end, setting myself back at least another 2 or 3 transfers. So yeah, well done, Sam. Very, very good from me.
Yeah, no, I know the feeling. And I think, I've done similar, just I think linked to another one later on. I've used transfers where I really shouldn't have, and that's had the kind of ongoing butterfly effect, much like you, that you've used those transfers then, and now here we are staring down the barrel of maybe looking at a -4 or a -8 hit, maybe even more. I don't know where you are with that, so talk about that later. But things like game week 5 taking a 1-week punt on Mateta against Man United, got subbed off at half time, probably a bit harder to flagellate myself about this one, but in game week 9, selling Semenyo, who's now looking like a good asset to hold for Garnacho. I didn't really need to do that at the time because he had like Chelsea up next, and West Ham, and then he had Chelsea, and this is where kind of the good run kind of started. But obviously, if I hadn't done that, then I have a better idea of, okay, maybe I could have just held it and I'd have an extra transfer to use now, wouldn't have to incur hits. And it's all sorts of stuff like that. With the captaincy as well, I think last week probably symptomizes this pretty well, just captaining Solanke over Salah. I think a principle that really I stuck to, especially with Lucy a couple of years back, was keep it simple, stupid. And I feel like I've just slightly moved away from that a little bit this year. I don't know whether it's just because of the whole sort of environment lending itself to being more laissez-faire, because there is definitely scope to be differential with the captain. Like where I went with Slanky this week and haven't done well, people elsewhere went with Bruno Fernandes, for example, and did
Yeah.
really well. So maybe I wouldn't be saying this if I was on that particular route.
I
But
wouldn't beat yourself up about that decision. I think he was in the mix for sure, and he was unlucky not to get something.
yeah. But I think it's still kind of about like managing what you can manage and trying to, I guess, adopt a sober and clear-eyed approach to FPL. And maybe that's slightly something that I've gotten away from. So that's something that I think I'm going to be trying to improve, I suppose. And that's kind of the key learning for me a little bit. Just keep looking back at that idea of keeping it simple, stupid, because even though these are only kind of small examples that I've cited and you've cited, they nonetheless have that butterfly effect that we spoke about a lot last year of having that knock on that reduces your flexibility and leads you kind of a bit down a cul-de-sac effectively that you're going to have to inflict a bit of pain on yourself to get out of in terms of FPL hits. So yeah, I think that's the key learning there, isn't it, Sam, really?
Yeah, for sure. And that butterfly effect is huge, and it is in play for us both already after just 12 game weeks. So it goes to show that these seemingly minor decisions do have much wider repercussions later on during the season. So yeah, one to monitor moving forward right now, and keeping it simple, stupid is right at the top of my agenda there.
Yeah. We have just been, maybe a bit too laissez-faire with our moves. I will not add some limited news. Was your one? I feel like we've, as per the cartel gates of a couple of weeks ago, I do think that we've been all right with that one. I think that we have been kind of quite good at keeping our powder dry until the last moment.
I certainly haven't acted too fast. I think barring one transfer, and that was for Salah, who historically has just never gotten injured ever, and I had almost spot on money to do it. So that was the one time I broke that rule. But considering what we do know about Salah, that seemed fairly low risk, and obviously it was fine in the end. Outside of that, I've been making moves pretty late. I've been waiting for all the press conferences. I've been making sure that I had all of the news available to me before making those decisions. Sometimes it is worth noting that this isn't necessarily a great rule to have for everything, because there is one major drawback to that, and that is my team value isn't looking too hot right now. DCL is bleeding me money right now. Raya as well, although I don't plan on selling him, and quite a few others have lost me a bit of value because I haven't been willing to move earlier. And if I had been willing to move earlier in this week, then I might have saved myself 0.1, 0.2, maybe even a little bit more on the transfers I am theoretically planning on making. But I think especially during an international break, the benefits of waiting outweigh the benefits of moving early on, especially because some of the players I'm looking at bringing in are playing in the internationals or they're flagged. So I need to be very careful there. And I'm glad I am waiting, even if it does come at the cost of a couple, maybe up to even $1 million in team value right now.
That's good. So we've kept one of them, which is always nice. So that's 1 out of 2. The third one I certainly have not kept to, so I will not stop watching football regularly. Some of that is just life. Weekends are very busy with a toddler and family and things like that. But there have definitely been occasions where the weekend hasn't gone how I've wanted it to, especially through the last kind of 3 or 4 weeks with captaining Haaland. Honestly, like it's been quite difficult to steel myself to watch match of the day. I think especially the Southampton game in game week 9, there's just no way in hell I was watching match of the day that day. No way I was going to do it. Put myself through that, because I, as I said at the time back in preseason, you can't help watch that if you're a proper dyed-in-the-wool FPL nerd like I am, without your FPL hat on, and you can't help but kind of see, all right, I'd have got, X amount more points there. If that had slightly been, if that ricochet slightly different off that player, then, I'd have been in the points there, I'd have got an assist, etc., etc. So there are definitely occasions where maybe kind of my vestige of the eye test is definitely faltered a little bit. So I think I'm going to have to try to make time to watch more football outside of family stuff. And even if things aren't going particularly well, I think there's definitely, I need to remind myself there's still merit in that kind of it's a match of the day or having the occasional game. I do kind of watch 1 or 2 games on a Sunday where I possibly can. But just trying to make time to do that, I think is going to be really important, because especially when games come thick and fast, things change so much. Some of those things are only going to be discernible through watching the games themselves. So, yeah, sometimes I can excuse myself, as in that Haaland example, where I've just got ridiculously unlucky. I can see that in the data. I don't need to see it for that to be confirmed and torture myself. But there's definitely going to be occasions going forward where I'm going to miss something which could possibly inform me and help me in terms of my FPL team.
Yeah, and I agree as well. This is probably the first full season I've had where time has really been a factor for me in terms of watching all the football I'd want to. And don't get me wrong, I'm still watching a fair bit of football, more than the average human being would. But I've got a job that I'm in London each day. I'm commuting. I'm not saying that to make anyone feel bad for me. I'm saying it because a lot of people I'm sure out there can relate to that. It is exhausting if you're doing that and you're up at 5 or 6 in the morning, you get home at 7:30 and there's not really much spare time, especially if you're out there with a family or kids or anything like that. It is quite difficult to catch up on all of the football because it is constantly ever happening, as per that Mitchell and Webb sketch. And you can never really catch up with all of it unless you pencil out your entire weekend and dedicate that time to it. And unfortunately, things happen on the weekend for all of us. So yeah, the watching football regularly thing is more challenging this season than I've ever found it before. But I am still trying to find pockets of time to catch up with the actual matches where I haven't been able to watch them live on a Sunday, for instance, with maybe like the extended highlights on the YouTube channels, for instance. And although it's not quite the same, you do still get a bit of a sense of positioning. I tend to bring up like a sofa score or a hub or something and get the heat maps for each of the players and how many shots on target, blah, 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 to try and give myself that extra little bit of color whilst watching the highlights of a match. And that seems to be helping a little bit. And if you're out there with limited time, like myself or Tom, then maybe that's an option. Watch the highlights with some sort of data alongside it so you can map out the trajectory of the game that way. But it's not easy, and it will get tougher over the Christmas period.
No, I really envy my younger self being able to watch all this football. Right. Next one's yours, Sam. I think that maybe it's one that you want to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, so I will not lose track of my own instinct. And that was a big one for me last season, where I did digest so much FPL content, still do. Like, I watch it on my commute. As much as I just said, I don't have as much time for football. I am obsessively listening and watching FPL podcasts and looking at Blue Sky, Twitter, X, whatever, for more insight. And I think over the course of a week, the narrative moves so quickly and so forcefully across all of these different platforms that you can lose track of what your own ideologies are at the start of a game week. And I think coming out of a Sunday, I've got quite good opinions of what I want to do next most of the time. And by the time I get to a Wednesday or a Thursday, I'm like, what was I even thinking at that point? Like, where did that come from? And where has that even gone? And it's because I've just taken in so much content, most of it absolutely fantastic. But if you digest so much content that some of it ends up contradicting each other, you lose track of what you want to sort of believe in by the end of it. And you do have to pick a path and be consistent in that. Otherwise, you will lead yourself down a route where you end up taking hits most weeks or making transfers most weeks because you're moving back and forth between two completely non-complementary paths in FPL. And the Salah Haaland thing is a great example of that, where if you're not too careful, you might end up listening to some great FPL content one week that's very pro Haaland, keep Haaland, buy Haaland, whatever. And then the next week it's all Salah. And what is your own instinct at the start of the game week? Well, that could easily get lost along the way, and you might end up making moves back and forth between, especially these premium assets, most weeks. So yeah, that's one thing I really want to do better at. And there have been times this season where I've gone against the narrative that I built up over the week, and I've just gone back to my initial instinct and just made that move, thinking not too much has changed since I first penciled that, and I'll just go with it because I know that past Sam had some sort of logic to it. And that might end up being what happens this game week as well. So we'll see. But so far, a little better. I give myself maybe a B- on this one if I was grading it, but I can certainly improve and do much better.
Yeah, it is difficult. It really links to another one, which I'm going to just throw in here as well, which is I will not default to the narrative. It's a bit later on. I've crossed it off on the running order, Sam, so remember not to redo it. And it's so true, isn't it, that you could so easily just get swayed by where the FPL community is going week to week and think, oh my, if I don't go for this guy now, I'm going to be absolutely killed because everyone's going to go there. You know, I'm going to be destroyed, and then it can often actually get in the way of your own plans, and it can kind of you get swept along, and at the end you kind of think, well, what was that for? Because once the sort of hysteria around a certain player dies down, you can find yourself regretting not going with your own feelings and your own emotions and your own instincts on certain players, as you've kind of said. So I mean that's really important. I think that for the most part I haven't really fallen prey to this so much.
No, I think you've done well on that one. Yeah.
I don't think he's actually been a bad signing as such, but like maybe Rico Lewis, that kind of last minute move, just because I have my transfers open, as in the timings. I mean, I remember saying to you at the time, like, sod it, I'm going Lewis, and I'm getting Lewis in kind of last minute. And I noticed that the players my wildcard game week 6, and the players that I sold were Mikolenko and Milenkovic, and Pinnock, and both of them have gone on to kind of score goals and keep clean sheets and things like that. So I think I'd actually be up if I'd have kind of followed that instinct through. And that was just because I saw lots of people going with Lewis. I was thinking, you know what, this is a train that I can't miss. Obviously, that's kind of a tangential example, because actually he's actually a good signing in of himself, but that's maybe an example of the sort of thing that you can maybe see at the last minute when you're really sort of, you know, het up, you're really sort of like under pressure to make a decision, and sometimes, you know, it's best to be relying on yourself, I guess is what I'm saying, and your own instincts, rather than relying on what you're seeing online, because often actually it can turn out that your own decisions, you feel better about having that responsibility about the ones that you've gone with, and often that can lead to decent outcomes.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's that fine tightrope walk between our two learnings or mistakes to avoid, that you've got to back your own instincts and also be careful that you're not being kind of dragged along with a narrative over a game week. And yeah, but getting that right is probably the art of doing well in FPL. And it's something that both of us are trying to master, but I'm sure we'll be making that mistake for years to come. So fingers crossed we get better at it.
Yeah, no, it's one of the things you've got to just train yourself to be better at as you move on in your FPL career. And I've been playing this for God knows how many years. There was a thing around in Blue Sky, like introduce yourself in this, introduce yourself in that. And one of them was like your best 4 ranks or something like that. And that happened to make me look at the rest of my career and how long I've been playing for. It's been since like 2009, something like that. So yeah, playing for an awful long time, seriously for a little bit shorter than that. But even I'm still making those mistakes, and even the best players make those mistakes every now and again, just less than I do, because a little bit than I am. Next one. Maybe even segueing, actually. I will not dismiss review as quickly. So this is quite a season-long one. I feel like at the start of the year, review is less useful than later on in the year. I think it takes a little while potentially to spin up to get that sort of level of impregnable brilliance that it does kind of eventually bring for you for an FPL manager. In the beginning, I think I do look at FPL review over the first sort of 10, 15 weeks and think, I'm not too sure I like what it's saying to me. And then
half the time you tell me it's drunk.
Oh yeah. I think that after a certain point, and maybe I think we'll be reaching that very soon. There's a point where if you just follow it, you'll be absolutely fine, which is to a lot of people's distaste, of course, but that's just the nature of the brilliance of the FPL review tool, honestly. So I think this is one that I'm kind of keeping on ice right now. It's tabled because I don't, at the start of the season, my sort of conviction is that it's not as useful as kind of as we get to the middle and end of the season. So for me, it's one that I've used it obviously just as a bit of a sense check, and that's the beauty of it. We spoke about it with Simon pre-season as well, about the humility of just accepting that actually FPL review probably has a better idea of what's best for you than you do. But early doors, my kind of analysis over the last few years, which is not backed up by the facts as much as possible, but my analysis is early doors. I don't really trust it as much as others do, but it may take a little bit after. There will be a time very soon, a point where I go over the top, and a flash point where I just think, yeah, okay, I see where it's coming from. I'm going to take it a lot more seriously. I'm not going to follow it like a proper kind of review aficionado, but I'll definitely weigh it a lot more highly in my thought process.
Yeah, I think you touched on it really nicely there, that it's a great way to sense check. And for those of you out there who might be thinking, what on earth are we talking about when it comes to FPL review? Do go check it out. It is a great tool, but it is just that. It is a tool. I think it's fplreview.com. You can certainly find it on all of the main
yeah,
FPL
that's the one.
bits and bobs. So yeah, do go check it out. It's really, really good. And it will help you map out your moves for weeks to come. But the way that we believe, or at least I believe it's best used, is at this stage in the season as a bit of a tool to sense check. And you hit the nail on the head there. Like, I don't want to dismiss it as quickly as I have in the past, a bit like you, but I also don't want to just follow it as if it was making the moves on my behalf. I'm much more than capable of backing my own instinct, as I said in the previous point, and I want to be able to continue doing that, because that is half the fun of FPL at the end of the day. So yeah, it's a great tool to be used. It's certainly not one to just dismiss, but also and let it work for you rather than doing the work for you, if that makes sense. I don't know if that actually made any sense, but hopefully you get what I mean.
Yeah, I get the sentiment. The sentiment is real, absolutely fine. But yeah, I think that's one to come back to later on in the season. Hopefully, maybe we can get Simon back on as well to discuss that.
Yeah.
Next one. Is this one that's really touched you so far?
Well, I think I've actually been doing pretty well on this one so far. So this one is, I will not underestimate set piece takers. In the past, I have maybe not entirely overlooked, but I've maybe not valued them as highly as I should have done, especially when it comes to things like corners and free kicks. I was pretty sound at making sure I was paying attention to the penalties, maybe not giving it quite as much attention as I should have, but this season I'm much more closely following the set piece takers, trying to make sure that I'm squeezing as much value out of them as possible. And in a 50-50 decision, I am much more often than not now looking at those set piece takers. And I'll just sort of anecdotally add on a little bit of an add-on to this point. I will also add in here bonus points monsters as well. That's another little edge in FPL that previous to this season I was aware of, and I was definitely taking it into account, but I wasn't paying it enough close attention, and it wasn't weighing on my mind when coming to making those 50-50 calls. This season, when I have got one of those calls, set pieces and bonus point or BPS abilities are much more high in mind for me, and I want to definitely continue using that moving forwards. And it will again be a major factor with the transfer decisions this week, for example, as well, which we'll come on to. So yeah, not doing too badly on this one, but I also don't want to go over the top and just imagine that just because they're on some set pieces makes them an invincible FPL asset, as we saw with Barco at the start of the season, for instance.
Oh God, Barco. That's a name I've not heard. Yeah, and remember Oscar Bob?
Oh man, he was so unlucky though. Bless him.
I know, but
that's just so unlucky.
It's one of those where you just think, God, early on in the season, there's so many things.
He would have got minutes as well. He would have been good.
That would have been incredible, wouldn't it? It would have been so good, honestly. Munoz. Another legend from the early game weeks. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's one I'm actually going to come back to you on later on, actually, when we're talking about the big hits discussion, because it's
Lovely.
really important, actually. And or at least one of those factors that I'm going to be definitely kind of thinking about a little bit more. Next one. I will not overestimate the power of one game week. Very much linked to not being too clever, because I'm such a sucker for this sometimes. This year I've only done it once, which is the Mateta move in game week 5, thinking, oh, you know what, if I buy like a serious differential, then it's going to go gangbusters for me. Have that differential for 1 week, and then off I go. Get rid of him. In this case, on wildcard. In other cases, maybe in a few weeks. Here I am now, sat with Garnacho that I'm not really too sure about. Although I can't, as we mentioned, flagellate myself too much about that. Sat with Slanky, who I brought in for the X-Mins going forward. I did give a decent sort of reasoning for why I was bringing him in. Plus Ipswich being kind of the immediate carrot a couple of weeks ago. But I think sometimes I do kind of think that one good game week's going to solve it all, and that is an enduring thing that again maybe we'll get into with the big hits, because I'm thinking now, right, that if I do kind of write my team, sort it out in with one kind of big hit, that I'll kind of get to a better position all of a sudden, and then from there I can build. But that comes at a cost of one big hit, or it comes at a cost of kind of using up transfers and yada yada and so on and so on. So I think sometimes I am guilty of this, Sam. I'm guilty of overestimating the power of one good week compared to sticking to the plan for a little bit longer. Because I mean, last year we discussed a lot that I kind of was less inclined to plan, but this year I definitely kind of embraced it wholeheartedly a little bit more. And I have found that on the odd occasion where I have, for whatever reason, decided to lean into the week at the expense of sort of longer term, I've been punished. So maybe this is one, again, which aligns with the idea of keeping it simple, stupid, but one that I really need to kind of bear in mind going forward, because it is it's just so enticing, isn't it? It's just to think, oh yeah, but if I get it all sorted for this week, my team looks really, really sexy for this week, everything else is going to kind of fall into place. But often the reality is that's not going to be the case, is it?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one as well, because I go back and forth on this. And I think in my own mindset, the way I evaluate this point in particular is I don't want to ever overestimate the power of optimizing for one game week. I do disagree in the sense that one game week can truly turn it all around at this point, but it's never quite the way you want it to, and it's never when you think it will come. So for instance, I was optimizing much more for game week 11 than I was game week 10. I didn't make the moves I wanted to in game week 10, thinking, okay, 11 is my time to attack. I'll have triple Spurs against Ipswich. I'll have a much better structure across my 11 as it happens anyway. And it all came in game week 10 for me. I got the Solanke massive haul. Obviously, Johnson did well. Rodgers got the goal in that Aston Villa Spurs game too. And I halved my rank at a time where my team definitely wasn't optimal for that game week. So I do agree completely that this is a really big point to not get too fixated on. You don't want to overestimate the power, or you don't want to throw all of your eggs into the basket of one game we can optimize for one. What you want to do is optimize for a long period of time, and then the universe, or FPL in this sense, will present to you that power in one game week that you might not necessarily expect it to happen in, but you have been basically rewarded for good planning over a longer period of time. And the fact that it doesn't happen at the exact moment or in the exact game week that you want it to doesn't mean that it won't happen. It just means that maybe sometimes a little bit more patience is required. And that's something that I'm trying to remind myself of. And your overarching point there is absolutely correct. If you're constantly optimizing and overestimating the power of the game week ahead of you, then you will lose yourself very quickly. And again, this is another way that you quite easily get tied into making hits down the line, because you aren't looking ahead far enough. You're not forecasting the future moves and the repercussions of your current actions. And yeah, again, I fell victim to this already at least once this season, if not slightly more. And the consequence of that might be one hit this week or next or whatever to try and get out of that and get back on the front foot for a longer period of time rather than just looking at this game week in particular.
And this is my problem, because a lot of the time you can kind of feel instinctively exactly what you need to do to optimize on that game week. You know what the best transfer. Every kind of FPL manager who's long in the tooth can look at the week ahead, look at their current team on paper, and think, okay, if I just do this move, then suddenly, I've got the scout picks for this week, effectively, or at least kind of a team approaching that.
Yeah.
And I guess it's kind of FPL General always says it's FPL is a lot of the time the main opposition is yourself, or was to that effect, and it's so true, because you can be lured in, can't you? And you've just given voice to it so many times, just by like, I could go for it. It's just a transfer. I mean, what's that going to do to me long term? But often when you come back to it, after the dust has settled, you think, oh crap, so now I've got to take a hit, or now I'm lumbered with a player I don't really want anymore, and that can be kind of you often say, Sam, you let other people make their mistakes, and that can often be sort of the main trap that I fall into, where other people do end up kind of pushing ahead a little bit, because especially in this new sort of era, other people making that kind of 1 week move are there with 3-4 transfers in the bank, whereas here I am with one transfer, using up my one transfer, and dear me, again, here we are staring down the barrel of potentially quite a large hit this week. Next one is one that you were very, very keen on pre-season. Is this one that you've been kind of paying attention to, do you think?
I've got 2/3 words for you. Dominic Calvert-Lewin. It's not worked out. So the next point is, I will not disregard player and team quality in my decision making. On the whole, I think I've been okay at this, with some very obvious notable exceptions. So Adam Armstrong at the start, basically my very, very final edge pieces in my side have been problematic in this sense. And it's always harder to get those edge pieces right. We talked about it last week, of course, as well. Because more often than not, those edge pieces are in teams that are slightly lower quality, or you've got slightly worse data that you're trying to pick through. But I think in this case, DCL in particular, even at that price point, there were other options in far better sides with better data as well. And I disregarded the fact that he does underperform on his XG season on season. I disregarded the fact that Everton historically don't score much more than 1 goal a game ever, and just went for him anyway. And whilst that's just one example that has really hurt me, but to the tune of maybe 30, even slightly more points over the last 4 or 5 game weeks, because the other strikers at his price point have been getting 8, 9, 10 pointers most weeks, and pretty much any other option I could have gone for would have outscored him by 20 plus points minimum. So whilst it's one player and it's one small decision, that is the difference between me at 1.4 million and maybe even 500k right now, at which point I'd be more than happy. So yeah, these small decisions you make, although seemingly not that impactful, definitely do make that big quality change. And this one is a big one for me moving forwards for the rest of the season.
Yeah, some of the chats just said life's too short for DCL.
It really is.
Yeah, exactly. And it's been said by the podcasters that I love, like James from Planet FPL and Always Shooting as well. I've said it. Well, do you want to be kind of staring at your team with a lot of these players who are from the lower echelons, to put it politely, of the Premier League? Probably not, to be honest, unless you get some sort of Lundstram-esque character. So the reality is, Sam, that you're completely right, and this is something which is really important just to bear in mind going forward with whatever moves you make. I mean, here I am sat with Leif Davis and Cunha, for example. I'm fine with Cunha, but Leif Davis at the time was like one of those players in my wildcard. I was like, I really want him there. Maybe got sucked into the I don't know, the luster of an asset that the numbers were quite good, etc. But the clean sheets are so important for defenders. He's not getting any of those. So yeah, and it's always one of those things that you need to bear in mind when making decisions. And sometimes team quality is just so important to where your peace of mind, I guess, with your team. A lot of the time.
Yeah. To wrap up, like, you're much less likely to knee jerk if you know that you've got a good player from a good side in that team. Even if they didn't get the points last week, you're more likely to give them a longer watching brief, knowing that the player quality will hopefully see you right towards the longer term. With DCL, just no faith whatsoever. So yeah, you're constantly on the edge of knee jerking and taking hits to get rid, because the bar is so much lower for them at that point.
On the edge of knee jerking, a rejected title for Casey Perry's On the Edge of Glory. Right, okay. So the final one, I think, segues us very nicely into the Gameweek preview and the knee jerk taking big hits. One of yours, Sam. I will not forget to go on the attack. I think it's fair to say that last week you were trailing a big hit. You said it was going to potentially coming. It's something that you've been thinking about an awful lot. And after that, as we were discussing kind of idly during the past week, I've begun to feel, oh, you know what? Actually, this might be quite good. I was speaking to FPL Raptor, or one of the Raptors at least. I'm sure it is the real Raptor on the Blue Sky the other day.
Will the real Raptor please stand up?
Yeah, he said that the streets remember that -20 I took. So it does seem like there are times potentially when this might happen. But so I will not forget to go on the attack, Sam. Shall we take this into the Gameweek preview to discuss the knee jerk?
Let's do it. Yeah,
I think maybe that might be quite good. So you normally on the Gameweek preview, you've got the knee jerk. We've got best transfers, best captains, bold claims. This week on the knee jerk, there are loads of things which are going on, but we're kind of mixing it in with the 10 things we're going to talk about, and it is taking a big hit. Linking in with the final one, I will not forget to go on the attack. Big hits we're thinking about, and why. I guess it's kind of the idea of getting things back on track, right? With players that you want long term, clearing out the chaff. We'll show our kind of teams in the moment and kind of talk about where we're looking to go. But I mean, what do you think of this idea? It does feel sort of sometimes quite cleansing, cathartic, doesn't it? Just to kind of just throw out all of the rascals.
Yeah, you've summarized it perfectly there. I think it's never necessarily advisable to be taking a big hit, because there's always a way that you can avoid it and still have a team that might get a green arrow. So like in a single game week where like the upside is a bit lower than in a double, and the -20 that Ross talked about with you was in a big double game week. So again, you can cover off those points more easily and more quickly. They can pay off. In a single, it's much less likely that they do. But we've seen hits, even if like technically they don't make sense, definitely pay off, but then also pay off over several game weeks. And in the position I'm in right now, with several bits of dead woods in my side, DCL being a notable one, but also Johnson I'm not particularly happy with. I don't have double, if not triple, premium midfielders. I need to make some moves there. Haaland, whilst himself I don't believe is a massive issue, it's a lot of money that if I'm going to remove him to get that midfielder, I would need to reallocate the funds. And if I was to try and make hits pay off, I would need to spend that money. Lewis in the back line as well isn't doing anything half decent whatsoever. I've got a couple of issues on my bench too. So whilst taking a hit, especially if we're looking at a -8, -12, I think I'd probably call it a -8 at most at the moment, is not something that would more often than not pay off this week. There is definitely something to be said for using one or two moments in the season to say, okay, I fell behind what I believe to be the strongest possible route to success. And the only way to catch up with it, rather than just consistently bleeding points every single week, is to just take one hit, make all the damage centered around 1 week and rip off the Band-Aid. And if I do that this week, then I can get rid of the likes of Lewis. I can get rid of DCL. I can make that swap with Haaland and Johnson and bring in 4 players that I'm much happier with over the next 10 to 12 game weeks. And hopefully that could pay off. And that is if I took the -8, I could take a -4 and be a little bit less extravagant. But those hits, over a 10 to 12 game week period, much more likely to pay off than just isolating it into this 1 week where most people would say, okay, it's unlikely that it does happen, obviously, but it's more unlikely it pays off in 1 game week.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Nick always used to say 2 things. One, I'm not going to do his voice, but one was that a hit is basically a striker's goal we're giving away. So that's what you're going down from. Although this year, a striker's goal is worth 7 points, isn't it?
Yeah,
rather
clean
than
sheet
just
loss. That's what it is.
Yeah. Clean sheet loss. There we go. Updated for the new era. And the other thing is elective versus enforced, right? So you want to be taking those enforced hits. Ideally, you want to be doing them when a player's injured, so you've got no risk of it coming back to bite you, and the deficit's kind of halved by the player showing up and playing over 90. And you're right about a few things there. So it accelerates your transfer plan, doesn't it? Effectively, at a cost, but it accelerates your transfer plan. Sometimes you look at it and you kind of think, you know what, screw it. As you said, I just need to throw out all the deadwood and just deal with it in one go. And that, by ripping up the band-aid, means you've got that long-term sort of payoff, as you mentioned. It does mean, though, that in the week itself, things can look really daunting, can't they? Especially if you see it as a net negative, right? My whole score with this kind of big sort of negative after it, one way of dealing with it, like Ross did back in the day, was looking at it a player-by-player basis, which is always really, really handy because you can kind of, hopefully, if things go your way, I don't know if it's too simplistic, but it helps your peace of mind. Just kind of piece together, okay, well, I moved this player for this one, that's gone well, that one for that one, not so well, but hopefully it nets out kind of vaguely positive and you can kind of just get on with it and not be kind of encumbered by the fact that there's a large negative affixed to your game week score. But obviously it comes down to balance, but sometimes it is worth doing it because I don't know, like if you use FPL.team or whatever else is out there in terms of transfer tools, sometimes if you look ahead a few weeks, you think, well, I need to have this amount to do this particular move that I really need to do. Like you mentioned the premium midfield, for example, like I really needed to get to, I need to get to Palmer, I need to get to Saka, something along those lines. Well, all right, maybe I need to release that money and also fix this burning fire, both in one go. And sometimes it's just not possible to do that. Maybe it's poor planning on our part, and maybe we've just been unlucky. Who knows? There's a lot of variance attached to this game. But yeah, I do think there are always positives in taking these hits. It's just something that I suppose, and playing devil's advocate, lots of people would kind of think, should you really do this? Could you just muddle through, especially in the analytics crowd? Like hits have long been seen as a bit of a needless expense of points, effectively, and that can obviously be a bit of a drawback, I suppose, to taking those big hits, even though at times they do look very, very sexy indeed. And I suppose we'll discuss them in a minute. But yeah, I mean, the devil's advocate point there, Sam. I mean, how do you pass that in this sort of situation? It's just because it's kind of, you're kind of smashing glass to deal with certain problems in your team.
Yeah, I suppose the way that you try and figure that one out is how pressing are some of these issues? Can one of them, maybe even 2 of them, be pushed back a week if needed? And how strong is your bench in the circumstances that, okay, you just don't want to play one of these players? Can you bring someone off your bench? Do you have depth? And my team at the moment, their defenders just aren't really scoring that many points anyway. So maybe a hit is unlikely to pay off if I get rid of Lewis, for instance. I've got Mikalenko on my bench at the moment. So Brentford are, I think, 2nd or 3rd highest scorers so far in the league. So unlikely to get a clean sheet. But even if he gets a 2-pointer, then it's unlikely that the player I bring in is going to beat him by 4 or more. So that's maybe a hit that can wait. With the strikers, getting rid of Haaland is obviously always risky. DCL could be benched and I could play Solanke against Man City. So again, that might be a way to go against taking a hit. And there's always going to be those excuses. I think most players, most managers who listen to this show will have at least 1 or 2 decent bench options, barring an injury crisis. So there's always an excuse as to not taking a hit. But I'm in 2 minds at the moment because, one, I can probably muddle through without taking a hit this week. I could probably just make the the double switch to get to Palmer and Isak, for instance, and bench DCL, bench Lewis, and muddle through for this week. And then I'll look at my team ahead of game week 13 and I'll still have 2 of the same issues to sort out, and potentially more if anything else changes. And I want to be able to get back on the front foot and use my transfers in a more aggressive way where I can go after the next big thing rather than constantly covering my tracks and constantly trying to fix leaks in my side, where I know I'm draining points every single week at the moment. And the longer that goes on, where I've got players like DCL starting or Lewis starting, I feel like I am going to continue to leak those points, and they're always going to be low priority. There's never going to be a perfect week to get rid of them, because I'm always going to prefer using my transfers on higher upside positions. So I need to find a time to do it. And I think looking back this season already, pretty much any game week I would have sold DCL, I would have made a profit on a hit so far, since I bought him. So it's just one of those where it's like, maybe I'll just admit defeat and take the hit and rip it off and just start afresh in game week 12 and beyond.
Yeah, no, I feel you. Probably a good juncture to discuss our teams, actually. I mean, we didn't normally do it at the end, but probably worth looking at that quickly here rather than there. So just teams for the game week ahead. I mean, you've got quite a lot on your plate, as discussed. I mean, your team's now on the screen. You're looking at selling Lewis, Calvert-Lewin, probably maybe Haaland as well. Anything else on the table, and who you looking to bring in?
Well, I'm only selling Haaland if it's to buy Palmer. That's simple. So Johnson definitely goes for Palmer if Palmer's fit. Obviously, he's been training, so we think he is. So that would be the double swap for Isak up top as well. And honestly, even that, I'm a bit scared of getting rid of Haaland now against what looks like a very makeshift Spurs backline that are already conceding quite a lot of big chances. So that's quite scary. I think long term it does pay off because of what else I can do with the money, and spreading the money and upgrading DCL to Acuna, for instance. And you could also look at moving Lewis, potentially even up to one of the Liverpool defenders if I wanted to, but also across to someone like an Ait Nuri might not be a bad way of playing it either. If I did all 4 of those, it would be a -8, obviously. And I think all 4 of those players set me up much better for the long term. But this week, I would be scared, especially of Haaland really hurting me. And there's definitely an argument to say that I could just bench Calvert-Lewin and Lewis, start Mykolenko and Solanke, and there's a decent chance that the hits for the other 2 wouldn't cover the points required from those 2 to make it a green arrow or to do better. So yeah, I'm in 2 minds. I wonder if you're able to help me out on this one, but yeah, I think DCL he just has to go. And if I was to really keep it simple and do nothing else, I could just buy João Pedro this week for DCL and kick the can down the road on the others.
The gaping hole is Cole Palmer, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's where it spins from here, because the run from now, as we discussed last week, until basically March is insane.
Oh, it's insane.
Really.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got Man City in 23 versus Old Club, hey, and Arsenal in kind of 29. But other than that, I mean,
we'll have wildcarded by then. It won't matter.
Oh yeah, maybe. But the whole run is insane, and he's got Leicester straight away this week, and ownership is pretty high. You're gonna get absolutely tanked by not owning that guy if he does go off. And I think Leicester's XGC is not really great as far as I'm concerned, and obviously Palmer is Palmer, right? You may get away with it this week potentially if there's some news that it's not quite worked out. Leicester third from bottom for XGC. It really does feel like it's the case that it's not quite now or never, but you're looking at him potentially being kind of the main issue for you going forward again and again and again. there is potential that you could leave it till game week 14 for the Southampton game, potentially. And that's something that you could possibly do. But I don't know. My feeling would be that you just kind of get it sorted now. Looking at game week 13, for example, Palmer's got Aston Villa at home. I don't see a way here you can get Saka in if you're keeping. Maybe you have to do a bit more actually, because Saka in 13, maybe you bring him in to be your captain for West Ham. But Palmer against Villa may be quite good because Villa have got a midweek game in the Champions League. Palmer doesn't play in the Conference League, so he's your captaincy pick in game week 13. And then going forward, the long term is just so good for Palmer. Honestly, I mean, in my position, owning Palmer, I'm looking at who I can add to Palmer. Right, it feels like he's going to be such like a staple of the entirety of FPL from this point onwards. And if selling Haaland is your way to do it, then you're already kind of on the road. You're already kind of thinking, well, all right, then what can I do? Johnson's your only midfielder that I really want to be looking to sell there. That's certain.
Yeah. Midfield's okay outside of Johnson, I think. And even Johnson, if he had better fixtures or there wasn't a Palmer of it all, could probably stay. But I think he is the player that I'm most willing to get rid of in that midfield to bring in someone with much, much better upside.
But he's the one that comes right out, as a friend said about Phoebe. And then Haaland, Calvert-Lewin has to go. So then you're already kind of that's both your free transfers used.
I mean, Calvert-Lewin does have to go, but he could be benched.
Yeah,
like I could start Solanke. It's not insane.
I wouldn't say no to starting Solanke, to be honest. But I just want to get that sorted, to be honest.
So do I. Yeah.
I just want to be like, fuck it, just get that all figured out. I don't know. I look at that. I look at your team and think, all right, there are definitely a lot of upside benefits, especially if we kind of track it over game week 14 to 16, that kind of accelerated period of FPL. It's best to be going into that, not even mention the Christmas period, having sorted your team to get back on the right track.
That's such a good point.
I'm probably okay with starting Solanke, honestly, but it might well just be quite worth getting rid of Calvert-Lewin. Just liberation is very, very close. It's not far away, Sam. It's the click of a button away from saving yourself from this hell.
So one thing on Solanke, because again, feel free to cut in and say I'm wrong here because I'm after an opinion. But although I think Spurs score against City, I don't think this is a good matchup for Solanke. I think it's a better matchup for someone like a Son, or actually, ironically, a Johnson, because I think Solanke's going to drop deep and he's going to be that pivot with the wingers bombing on beyond. And we know that they've already found themselves wanting in those areas, that being Man City. And Spurs are very good at dropping Solanke in and using him as that spare 10 almost with runners in beyond. And I've just got this feeling that Highline City get caught once or twice, but I don't think Solanke's necessarily the one who's going to be on the end of the chances. I think he's almost going to be the one on the halfway line playing that pivot. And therefore, although I actually don't hate the Man City fixture on paper, I'm a little bit less tempted to start him for that reason. I don't know whether that's just me looking back at the mistakes from earlier. Am I being too clever there? Am I overthinking it? Or is that tactical analysis that I need to take into account?
I mean, one thing I would point out, I'm sure you already know, is that Benton Kerr's been suspended for an awfully long time for making an anti-Asian joke. So that might mean that, I mean, you might see Maddison potentially playing in the deep position, which may negate the need for Solanke to be doing that. You may see that. I think that we need probably a bit more information over the course of the next week or so. Well, obviously next week. But that might negate the need for Solanke to play that way, especially because as well, Brand, as you said in the chat too, that who are Man City missing? Well, you've got Stones and Ruben Diaz, who are on the 50% flag at the moment. Like basically all of their centre backs are flagged. So, no, same for Spurs as well. To be fair, with missing Van der Ven and Romero went off injured too. So, also it's being said in the chat that Kovacic apparently has gone off injured as well, which is going to be again a bit of a feather in Solanke's cap. I don't know. I think you might get away with that actually, and maybe lessen the hit. I mean, overall, because you've got Rodgers too, you could feasibly kind of get by for a little while with Calvert-Lewin just sat on your bench, which sounds awful, but he's a really good first sub, isn't he? You're paying a lot more for a first sub than anyone ever could be. But I mean, you end up with Palmer, Semenyo, Bumo, Salah, Rodgers, Solanke, and then whoever comes in for Haaland. That's a pretty decent 3-5-2 to be getting on with for a little while. I don't mind that at all as an attacking front seven. So, all in all,
yeah. Actually, to be fair, also that's an easy swap for Pedro next week as well. DCL to Pedro because he's got Southampton at home. So that could work.
Yeah, all in all, you don't need to take the big hit. I do think that you definitely need to do something in your defence, that's for sure. So, but yeah, I think removing Haaland, removing Johnson, and then moving on the defenders is probably as far as I go there. Greaves is just annoying. But,
you should be back soon, though.
Yeah. And they've got a few fixtures where he can come in. And Mikalenko runs into bad fixtures fairly soon, but you can weather it with a mind. That's a -4, isn't it, to take 3 players out?
Yeah.
In the chat is saying keep Calvert-Lewin against Flecken, which I kind of understand what they're saying. But
it's like someone said in the chat earlier, it's the most movable force versus the least solid whatever object. It's just not. Yeah, it's just so poor. Somehow Flecken will find a way to concede 2 or 3 times, and none of them will be DCL. And honestly, I think there's a decent chance Beto starts head of DCL at this point as well. Yeah. So I just don't think I can. I could probably see myself just taking a -4 this week, but we'll see.
Yeah, so I don't mind Solanke really because he's got the X-Mins over the other players in that sort of price bracket. All of them. So think about they've all got but I suppose Isaac Newcastle, great player in mind for both of us. Injury record is not exactly the best. Callum Wilson is hardly going to be kind of challenging him, but there's always that about him, even though he's part of the potential for this week to come in. Watkins has obviously got Mr. Duran as a stalking horse, really good fixtures coming up over the short term, but with is it Leipzig they've got in the Champions League?
Yeah, I think it's Leipzig,
So Chelsea, Leipzig, and then Leipzig, Chelsea, Brentford, Southampton. There's going to be a game that Watkins doesn't play, probably, as James Planet keeps saying,
or at least minutes reduced.
But Solanke's just got the X-Mins effectively over long. There's a few other players in there too, obviously, which I'm not going to go into here for time reasons. Solanke's just kind of Spurs. Let's not forget are producing a lot of XG as a team, like not far off City, and they will keep creating chances. The bad day at the office against Ipswich, which has affected me far more than most people because I captain Solanke, but I still think that the combination of X-Mins plus Richarlison obviously injuring himself and everything else does mean that he's a decent enough hold over a little while. The fixtures aren't great. There is Southampton game week 16 as a carrot. But I think I'll keep creating chances. So I think it's probably okay just to kind of play and just go with it. So yeah, -4, I think, for me, for your team, unless you really, really, really come to the conclusion that I want to get rid of another player as well, which I'd be behind it for the reasons that you detailed effectively.
Yeah.
Both sides make a lot of sense. It's just ultimately what you think you want to do.
Good points, well made. But I don't want to be too obsessed with my own team. We've got yours to talk about too, Tom, and you've potentially got a big hit on the cards as well. So why don't you read off your team and we'll assess yours as well.
Well, I've got one free transfer left due to the butterfly effect of peeing around with the likes of Garnacho and Mateta way back in game week 5, but this year it counts because you roll your free transfers through the wild card. So I'm pretty happy with a fair bit of it. The only problems I've got is I've got Trent, who needs to go. I've got Palmer and Salah in place. And through selling Trent, I can basically replace one of Johnson or Garnacho with Saka. And I really kind of really like the cut of Matoma's jib. So I definitely feel like moving Trent for one of Hall or Colwill, the two players we spoke about last week in terms of the edge pieces, makes a lot of sense to free up some money. Then moving on, probably, so Johnson would then go for Matoma. I think that's probably going to happen. And then it's kind of like, do I just get Saka in place now, assuming that I think I go with the instinct that he's going to be fit, and just get that sorted, get it done. He's there, happy, ready to go. Much like Palmer, Arsenal's fixtures, obviously they are always the hard fixture, but Arsenal's fixtures are great all the way until the end of January. 1st of February, we play Man City. But again, after that, he's a quote unquote season keeper, leave in, high floor. Yeah, I know that he's kind of in the premium bracket. Don't know if I'll captain him that much, but he's a player that I think will just consistently return to me week after week and raise the floor of my overall score. So I've got two dodgy players in Garnacho and Johnson. Johnson, who I do like, as I said last week, his XG per 90 is always really high. Got the City this week, so a really good excuse just to sell. Garnacho, questions surrounding him. Could keep Garnacho, just roll on the X-Men's, hope it works this week, but I'd have to make the transfer again next week anyway. So I'm thinking, well, Trent has to go, so I'll bin him off for one of Hall or Colwill. I know that you said one of your mistakes not to make was neglecting set pieces. You said last week that Hall was on corners and et cetera, and so on for Newcastle. But Colwill has that long stretch of fixtures, so one of those two. And then Johnson for Matoma, who I gave the case for last week, but underperforming, 15th non-pen XGI, et cetera. And then it's just the case whether I take the -8 effectively, bin off Garnacho despite there being an Ipswich game, assume that he probably won't play under Amorim's system, get Saka in place. Hey presto, I've got a -8. I hope that Johnson doesn't return in the way that you kind of forecasted against City, and hope that Garnacho doesn't really play very much against Ipswich, and hope that Trent doesn't play. And hey presto, I've kind of sorted out a few of my problems. Admittedly, I'm still playing Davis this week or Mikolenko this week, and again Davis against Man United or Mikolenko against Brentford. But I mean, them's the breaks. I don't think I'd take a further hit to deal with that. It's just not worth it, really, above of those three. But it feels like every time, all right, Trent injured, out for a playing player with a long kind of stretch of fixtures in Colwill's case, or in Hall's case, a player who has got that kind of attacking threat, I suppose, a little bit with decent fixtures in the kind of the intermediate term. Johnson would then go out for a Matoma, a player who's got Brighton again with a very long stretch of good fixtures, and then Garnacho out for a Saka, who's just effectively a season keeper. Just get that in now, sorted, done, and take the mindset this week and hope those three things go my way in the 1 week kind of scenario. But over the long term, I've kind of sorted a lot of my team out. I think I'd have to move on Mikolenko maybe going forward, because I know that Everton have got a few crap fixtures coming up for game week 15 to 18. I think they play all of the top 4, the projected top 4. So he has to go then. But I can deal with that. I can play a Davis this week. That's okay. That's fine. So yeah, that's kind of where I am. I'm kind of thinking similar to what we were talking about earlier, about sentiment of just, you know what, just get it sorted, get it done, have a week of pain, but then have that long-term gain.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I was, whilst you were talking, I was trying to map out what the alternatives are, and the more I just kept coming back to the players you're bringing in, you are going to be extremely close to what I would consider to be the perfect game, the perfect setup, not for just this game week, but for a medium to long term. You've got a bit of Brighton covered off. You've got the triple premium midfield with Mbermo, Cunha up top with Solanke. That's absolutely fine. Over time, you can maybe sort of flex a little bit to get to a Pedro instead of a Stewart, maybe to bolster with an 8th attacker, but generally you're not far off. And yeah, then it's just little tweaks to the defense. Mikolenko and Lewis can get shifted soon enough. But yeah, it's quite hard to argue against it, other than the fact that -8 is quite a brutal thing to cover off in one game week. But like you said, if Matoma and Saka especially are long-term picks, which they are, you would like to think that they easily outscore Garnacho and Johnson by 8 or more points over the next even 3 or 4 game weeks, let alone 9 or 10. I do think that it is possible that you can wait a week on a bigger hit and just leave Garnacho in and take the risk that he could play against Ipswich, because if he does, then that is a huge upside fixture for him. And look, it's not like he's been awful all season. He scored plenty of goals. Amarim's not going to completely set him to one side and disregard him. All of us are pretending to be experts on the system. Like, we don't know what Amarim's going to do in that first match. And whilst it looks likely he'll revert to type, it might still be the case that it will take a few weeks to get up to that. And Garnacho might still find a spot for himself in that team for a little while, if not longer, if he plays well. So that's one player that I would be maybe a little bit cautious about getting rid of so quickly. I agree that he is a sell eventually, but for like an extra -4 on top of the other stuff. For example, could you do just Trent and Johnson out for Saka? And you've got the money.
Yeah, I could do. Yeah. I could just leave it for a week with Matoma. I think that's kind of on my mind to potentially just kind of half-ass it effectively.
Yeah, but Matoma's great fixture is next week anyway. So if you do wait a week, you're still getting the Southampton game. Whereas this week, okay, it's a decent fixture, but it's not better than Ipswich away. And if you're, I know there's obviously a big risk on Garnacho starting, and I don't want to put this out there and say he's nailed in to start. There's going to be a huge risk for you to sell him, because obviously this is calculated, but he could easily start that game. And if he does, that is a game that you're going to be very annoyed not owning that player, especially for a hit as well. When the player you're buying has a slightly harder fixture, and the better fixture is in game week 13 anyway. That would be my only hesitation with it. But like you said with mine, even though you could avoid the hit, all of those 3 transfers make a lot of sense. And long term, I think it almost unquestionably pays off, that hit. It's just whether or not you can make yourself an even better scenario by not taking the extra -4, and therefore you're just an extra 4 points up on the whole deal.
This is where it all kind of starts to have a knock on. So next week I need to make a defensive transfer 100%, because I've got Lewis away at Liverpool, Mikalenko away at Man United, and Davis away at Nottingham Forest. So I've got to make a defensive transfer next week, I think. And then, so basically, is a -8 now to sort stuff out better? A -8 in 3 better than 2 -4s is the question that becomes.
Yes, I think it is. It is, probably.
Yeah, so
if you know you're doing it, the earlier you do it, the more chance that it will be paying off, especially if there are risks for starters. And Trent obviously is not going to start. Garnacho is a risk. And obviously Johnson, for everything I've said about Man City's setup versus Spurs, Johnson's not a better pick than Saka this week, or Mitoma. So
then we'd have both of us in our current situation have got Solanke anyway, which quote unquote gives you that kind of cover exposure to the Spurs attack. So yeah, and plus I've got a bit of a profit on Johnson, so I'm happy to cash that. I mean, it's weird, isn't it? But sometimes, it might worth knee-jerking into that hit. But yeah, we'll see where we net up by Friday. Right, the rest of the thanks for that, Sam. The rest of the game week, the best transfer, the rest of the game week preview, best transfers is up next. So quite a lot going on here, which is. We've seen like kind of FPL always comes around, doesn't it? Really, you see players at the start of the season get discarded, and then suddenly they're back in vogue. And unsurprising that Mo Salah has been brought in a lot, over 300,000 transfers for him. Second though is Bruno, Portuguese aficionado at Man United, 275,000 transfers for him. Ferdis Wissa, despite the flag, I'm sure there's a lot of early transfers there, but two double-digit hauls in 3 game weeks would do that for a player. 200,000 transfers in for him. Aligned to him, Isaac, 3 goals in 3 games, brought in by 186,000. A lot of them selling Haaland, who's got 270-ish thousand sales. Close to a drop tonight. If you're watching now, and if you're listening tomorrow, may well have dropped according to the hub ticker. And Slanky has been sold as well by 133,000, and Cunha as well, 180,000 transfers in for him off the back of a 12-pointer. Other side, Trent very close to a drop. I'll be monitoring that really closely. Might need to make a decision between Hall and Colwill sooner than I want to. Probably going to end up defaulting to Colwill, but hey, we'll see. And then elsewhere, like McNeil and Luis Diaz. I mean, Luis Diaz is one of those players who burned brightly and then kind of got sold off quite a lot. I'm glad I sold him at his peak, to be honest, a couple of weeks ago. I think it was at 8.1. Back in game week 7 or 8, something like that. But yeah, quite a lot going on. Bruno and Isaac Sam both flouting their abilities and both looking like they might be quite decent transfers in, although in Bruno's case, it's a very short-term one.
Yeah, I mean, Bruno is short-term / extremely long-term. It depends what your horizon is on him. Obviously, the next 2 fixtures are great. There's a little patch of poor ones, and then after that, it turns pretty great again. And generally speaking, there was a reason I was hot on him at the start of the season. It didn't look like it was paying off, and it now looks again like he is either putting away the chances, or the chances that he's creating are actually getting finished off a little bit more. And under the new system, you'd expect that to improve as well with less defensive duties. We're speculating, but it looks like he might be playing in one of those 2 number 10 roles if Amorim plays the same system long term. So he looks like a player I'm going to be extremely interested in very, very shortly. It's just whether now's the time to be hopping on him or wait until after the next little patch of poorer fixtures. I'm going for the latter because I think there are more pressing matters for me to attend to in my midfield and players I need to get first. And unless you're in a scenario where maybe you've got all but Saka of the premiums at the moment, you could maybe put off Saka and go for 2 weeks of Bruno before then moving across to Saka. But outside of that, I think Palmer's more of a priority. Salah's more of a priority. I probably wouldn't be getting rid of Mbermo for him yet. So whilst I'm really tempted by him generally, I think the timing on it is important now that the first of those 3 nice games are already out of the way. I'm happy to maybe wait until after that next little poorer patch of fixtures.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. It's kind of you end up looking at him versus Arsenal, and then you end up looking at him versus City in 16 and just think, all right, if this was Man United evolved, which Amorim may well resurrect.
Not immediately, though.
Yeah, you're into kind of a hopium sipping Man United fan territory there, which it's fair to say neither of us are. So, yeah, I can kind of get it if you're going there right now and just think, you know what, 2 weeks, especially if you've got 3, 4, 5 transfers kind of hanging around. Yeah, why not? Go for it. Just go for the short-term gain. I just wish Garnacho was suited to that system. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like it's going to work for me. But yeah, I think Bruno is just one of those nailed-on players who's going to benefit from new manager bounce, which is their thing, and we do see it an awful lot in FPL, as discussed a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, other than that, I think it all kind of makes sense. I like Isaac as well as a buy. I really strongly kind of advocate if you're looking for a striker now to buy him. I really wish I'd done that last week, honestly, rather than going with Slanky. But that's really hindsight, and the fixture on offer for Slanky versus Ipswich was a lot better than the fixture on offer for Isaac versus a very, very hitherto defensively strong Nottingham Forest, and that's reflected as well in the bold claims. Right?
It should be. There we go. Yeah, it's coming up. So bold claims from last week. It feels a long time ago now. Spurs to score 5 versus Ipswich was bold. Did not happen at all. Nowhere near, in fact. And that was mine, so didn't come off. And yours, Tom?
Yep, I said that there's only going to be one clean sheet in Game Week 11. I thought there were loads of teams that were well suited to play each other and didn't quite kind of manifest that way. So West Ham, Everton, to my great joy of playing Fabianski, turned into the most dull 0-0 you'll ever see. Last game or match of the day, I almost just kind of thought, well, why did they even bother?
I switched off match of the day before.
Yeah.
I just got rid.
FPL fellow Dan said that pointed out that the only kind of highlight was a tackle from Somerville. That's hilarious. But yeah, obviously, like Crystal Palace having players sent off, etc., does impact things. But that's the very, very small tightrope that we walk during these bold claims. So yeah, still 2-2. What have we got this week?
So I've always said on this pod before that a hat-trick is always bold, and I'm going to stick by that. My bold claim this week is Haaland matches what he did for Norway and gets a hat-trick against Spurs. I think you've made this exact bold claim at some point this season as well. I don't think it paid off. So I'm hoping.
I wish it did.
Yeah, I'm hoping that this time it does. Well, I'm not really if I'm selling Haaland, but I've just got this gnawing feeling in the back of my mind that he's going to go big against Spurs, and I just can't quite help that feeling from sinking in. So even if I do sell him, it probably would be for Isak, as we mentioned, and I have very good hopes on Isak too, but I am petrified that Haaland's going to go massive against Spurs, and a hat-trick is my bold claim.
The old happiness hedge. I like it. I've done the same thing. So my bold claim this week, Salah to blank as Liverpool win by 2 or more goals versus your beloved Saints. Yeah, I don't know. Just 9-0 versus Bournemouth where Salah got appearance points. It has that sort of feel about it.
I would be very surprised about that one.
Yeah, but that's the nature of a bold claim.
It is. Yeah, that's why it's so bold.
It's going to be the heaviest owned captain. Post-international breaks, you know what can happen. Script has been written, as James said, on the Clash Correspondence, that your bottom team is playing a Liverpool team that hasn't lost away all season. Could it happen, Sam? Could it?
No,
probably,
it won't.
Probably not.
I nearly put it as my bold claim though, just for a laugh, but then I thought it's just way too biased and people are going to drop off the pod. So no, we're not going to be beating Liverpool, unfortunately, as much as I'd love it to happen.
Lovely. All right. So best captain this week.
Well, it's tight this week, isn't it? There's a lot of good options, and even arguably Isak at home to West Ham might not be a bad one if you wanted to go a bit bold and differential. But Haaland at home to Spurs, I've already touted that one. Spurs backline looks really makeshift at the moment, and even at the best of times, they do concede a lot of big chances through the centre. Salah versus Southampton, as you've just mentioned, and Palmer against Leicester as well. All really, really decent captaincy options. I think it's going to be... I think more people are going to be on Salah because of basically what's just been happening in the last few game weeks. But all things aside, I think that these three are actually pretty evenly matched. Maybe Salah and Haaland are ever so slightly ahead of Palmer, but he's certainly not out of consideration. Even Saka at home to Nottingham Forest might not be the worst call either. So, yeah, lots of good options this week.
Yeah, Salah in the top million overtook Haaland in terms of EO last week. So I think certainly that's the safe call. I don't know. I obviously, if Palmer was fit, I think that they're definitely, well, if Palmer was not flagged, I think there definitely may be a bit more of a discussion about that against a newly promoted team. And that could be a really kind of nice little gamble, I suppose, if you're really looking at trying to push ahead, go for differential captain, but it's difficult, isn't it, to make the case otherwise. So, yeah.
Is there an argument on Haaland though?
Yeah, definitely. If
that
you are
differential,
I think a differential Haaland. I mean, in last couple of years, I think we'd both have grasped that with both hands, wouldn't we? We both loved it if there was a chance to have a differential Haaland against a team who are missing potentially both first choice centre backs
at home,
who play in a particular way which could well, benefit Haaland at home.
Is KDB back?
I don't know.
We know that.
No, we don't know yet.
Okay.
So as far as I know, I don't know if he's trained or anything. I did kind of have a brief look, but I know he was on the bench, wasn't he, last game?
I think he's closing in. Yeah,
but I don't know whether that was kind of an answer to Guardiola's call to arms, whether he's actually fit. Any of these are absolutely fine options this week. I think that Salah is going to be the chip leader in terms of EO. But if you do go for Haaland, you do go for Palmer, and either of them outscore Salah by 1, you're laughing effectively, which is great. This is why FPL is really good this year, frankly. That there are even junctures where one of the top scorers, if not the top scorer in FPL, is playing the bottom team. With all due respect, Sam, and you've still got options outside of the short captain.
Yeah, it is worth noting, just because we haven't on this pod yet, it will be McCarthy in goal for Southampton, we think.
Oh my goodness! Well,
Ramsdale is out with a broken finger.
Let me just get my triple captain active. Oh wait.
Yeah.
Oh God.
It is an option. I always revert back to what you always say after an international break, that the game weeks end up being a little bit of a damp squib, and they're not quite as exhilarating and as high octane as other regular game weeks. And that's the only thing really holding me back from properly considering that. I think Salah is probably where my boss team captain goes as well at the moment.
I kind of feel like after last week, I've got to keep it simple.
Yeah. I don't want to overthink it at the moment.
Yeah. God. Well, there we go. Let's see how we go at the end of the week, and we will obviously keep you updated about what our final moves are on the old Blue Sky these days rather than X.
Yeah, of course. And thank you all so much for listening. It's just gone over the 90-minute mark again, very much in style for us at the moment. Thank you all so much. If you are on Blue Sky, as Tom mentioned, it's WGTA on there, or FPL Pricey as well. We have been Who Got the Assist. The other social channels that you can find us on, as always, we will probably still be posting on Twitter and X. I certainly will be anyway. WGTA_FPL, or myself is FPL Pricey there. Instagram and Threads, WGTA.FPL. FPL Pricey on there for me as well. And if you did enjoy the pod today, if you could give us a follow on all of those socials, especially on Blue Sky because it's new. And if you could also give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening, or give us a like/subscribe on YouTube. Again, that would be really, really helpful. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And thanks, Sam. I hope you enjoyed the pod, and looking forward to FPL returning. Hopefully us looking over our 10 mistakes has made you wonder about where you may have gone wrong, or if you're killing it, enjoy some Schadenfreude. Just say I will be on FPL Have a Beer, being interviewed about my experience with fantasy football, the whole journey of the last 8 years, next Thursday night, or this Thursday night, I should say. I'll be published, I believe, next day. But yeah, looking forward to that one too. We'll pop it on socials, of course, and we'll speak to you very, very soon. All the best this weekend coming up.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.